Is Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. I'm a former teacher turned cognitive neuroscientist who focuses on human learning. And I do not receive funding, nor have I ever, from big tech. So a sad fact our generation has to face is this. Our kids are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. Since we've been standardizing and measuring cognitive development since the late 1800s, every generation has outperformed their parents. And that's exactly what we want. We want sharper kids. And the reason for this largely has been school. Each generation spends more time in school. We use school to develop our cognition. Congratulations, you see your correlation. Until Gen Z is the first generation in modern history to underperform us on basically every cognitive measure we have, from basic attention to memory to literacy to numeracy to executive functioning to even general IQ, even though they go to more school than we did. So.
All right, welcome back to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight under your brain. What are we talking about today, Semo?
Well, if you couldn't tell from the cold open, hey, for once we're not talking relationships in the last month. We are talking the effect of tech and IQ and basically cognitive function. And in this case, he's talking about schools, but I think I'm going to get a little more general as well. And I've got comments about what the last sentence he said, but I want you to get your part in first.
I think I know he was trying to be brief in his opening statement there, and I know there's a longer video of this testimony before whatever committee this was. But I would say that it's not just we spend more time in school, as we've both ranted about. Public schools kind of suck in America. Even the good ones have some serious issues. And I don't think it's just that. It is the push by the previous generation to do well in school, to learn. But then also, I think, millennial slash where we are of kind of the, as I've said before, I don't know if we're young Gen X or old millennial, we're kind of in that gray area. But I think we especially had a good opportunity for cognitive development because, as you've pointed out, our prefrontal cortex was pretty well developed by the time the internet came around in a ubiquitous manner. So
yeah, we had access to it like our last 2 years of high school, but it was very limited. I mean, any kid today would be like, what the heck is this? I have to wait, 30 seconds for a picture to load.
Exactly.
And that was the good internet. That wasn't the slowest dial-up.
Now, obviously, we wasted a lot of time with those things. I played the heck out of Quake and StarCraft when I should have been studying, but there was also the opportunity to go exploring intellectually. Like, I'm curious about a thing. Let me go down a rabbit hole reading, not just watching shorts, not just watching reels, but let me go down a rabbit hole of articles and links about this topic I'm interested in that may or may not have anything to do with what I'm studying. I'm just curious and I want to satisfy that curiosity. That, I think, is the big problem with, and I don't know how much he went into this on the neuroscience level, but I think that's the big problem when it comes to attention span. That I think the attention span is kind of a symptom of the lack of intellectual curiosity and the inability or unwillingness to do intellectual work.
Okay, so I'm going to switch my order. Hold on. Let me make sure I don't forget what I was going to do first.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So attention span, he does address that because I didn't know this, but he's talking about the current SATs. And what he brings up is previously, and we remember this from when we did it, we had reading comprehension. And that was you read a big, long section of text, and then you have like 10 to 12 questions to answer about it. And they're not direct facts from the text. They are contextual. You had to think about them. And so you had to infer things from the text. And then he said the modern SAT is one sentence about less than 75 words, which is a tweet. Uh, 75 words or less, one sentence, and it's a factual question about that sentence.
Mm.
And so that directly, because I had to switch the order because you brought up attention span first. And not only is it not the best measure of reading comprehension, but also it is they're adjusting the test to the attention span of the students because to read a long read a long excerpt and then be able to remember and cognitively answer these questions, you need to have an attention long enough to read the whole thing and actually comprehend what you're reading, not just skim over it and then answer some factual questions. And so instead of 12 questions for several excerpts, it is 52 questions or 52 sentences with one question each. And I did not know they adjusted the test. So we can't even go by SAT scores anymore to compare what we did as kids versus what this new generation of kids is doing in the SAT as far as reading comprehension, because it's actually a completely different thing. And it more reflects social media than it does reflecting actual reading comprehension.
Yikes. That is, I had heard things along this line before, and I think I've shared this before of um professors, pundits, journalists, I've all heard talk about this phenomenon of the last several years of incoming freshmen in college don't know, can't read an entire book because they've only ever been given excerpts. And professors either don't have them read whole books, or if they do, the students are, basically throwing a fit of, we can't do this. That's too much work. And they don't know how to sit and read an entire book. And that just blew my freaking mind because all the way back, at least in middle school, if not elementary school, I mean, the books were small, they were appropriate for the grade, but we read books. We did book reports. That was a staple of school, of even in elementary school. Again, it was a small book, but you're a small child, so it was appropriate for that. And you had to read the entire thing and then be able to synthesize it to explain it to someone else. That is good cognitive development. You've talked about how the best way to remember something is put it in your own words.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're taking notes, if you're trying to summarize something, put it in your own words to get those gears, break off the cobwebs and get them moving in your head so that you're actually thinking about what you're reading or hearing, not just, passively taking it in.
Well, and even when I'm reading like scientific literature or a nonfiction book on a subject I'm into, which has been, of the biological, psychological in nature as I'm drawn to, I write in the margins because I'm summarizing a thought. I'm like, this makes me think is what a lot of my margin writings say. This makes me think X, X, Y, Z, Z, Z. Okay. And that helps me remember what I wrote or what I read as I'm going through because again, you're not only, when we talked about MEDDIC a couple episodes ago, you're not only contextualizing it, which is the C, but you're applying importance to it because it is a passage you picked out. And if you add something that this makes me think about, and you put it to something that you are already thinking about maybe in your head or you've actually experienced in your life, now you've added meaning, right? So you've added all of these things that just add little data points in your brain to help remember something. But we're not getting that anymore. Or at least we'll say not all schools in this country are equal.
Mm.
because you just experienced this when you brought up something while we were watching the Super Bowl, and you said, "What was that?" I think it was in Fahrenheit 451,
Oh yeah.
and my son jumped up and was like, "Oh yeah, da 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 da," and the book was sitting right behind me because he had read the book and he had to read the book for class and actually write reports on the book.
Hmm. Yeah. This is so I read a lengthy, somewhat depressing article by someone who is in tech, in AI development, talking about that he thinks the the doom and gloom about AI is not hyperbole and is going to happen quicker than we think. Um, and this is based on the fact that he works with the latest model. So most of my griping about AI comes from the free version. And he
Mhm.
said that's a year to 2 years behind what is actually current. And he tried to end it on something of a high note of I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but you know, it could potentially unlock your inner creativity, your inner goals, give you the ability to do things you didn't think you would ever be able to do because these large language models, once they become sufficiently sophisticated, can do a lot of work and a lot of grunt work that we no longer have to do. And so it is, I've used as a reference before, Star Trek The Next Generation is there is no want because of the level of technology. You basically have super advanced 3D printers on a molecular level. So there's no scarcity, which is essentially what economy is all based off of, is scarcity of how do you get things to people who want them, need them, and can't do them themselves. Well, if I can go to a machine and just have it give me my food, give me my tool, give me my whatever, what do I do with my life? Well, as they say on a number of times through the show, we work on bettering ourselves. We explore our creativity.
Mhm.
We explore our minds and our humanity in these things. And well,
You know,
that
that's the
only
argument for universal basic income,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. But
which we
that
saw
only
that in effect during COVID, that
yeah,
it
and
was not going to happen.
there have been a number of small scale studies where or experiments where this has been implemented, like on a city level or on a small scale level, and it doesn't work. It does not work at all. And I think
It
that
may
is
work for some individuals,
yes.
but on a population level, it does not seem to work.
So the utopian ideal of Star Trek would only work if you have a sufficient foundation with enough of a cohort of your population that can do that, that wants to do that, and that's the key, both willing and able to do that.
Well,
If
and
you
here's the
don't,
thing: we're talking. So I'm going to get dark for a second.
Mhm.
We're talking Star Trek in the future, right? What if they eliminated the welfare program with that, and the ones that would do that naturally selected to be the majority of the population? We don't know what happened between modern times and Star Trek.
Mhm.
There's your food for thought based on that concept.
Yeah, and well, if you go down the rabbit hole of the lore, there was a like century or more of like World War III and turmoil, and just everything went to crap. And it was out of that this utopia came from. So there is an element of human nature there, and of historical example where you can see things like that. And so for anyone who thinks, oh well, the coming AI apocalypse will be a good thing. Well, do we have to have the apocalypse first? Are we going to have to get worse before we get better? And if so, how bad is it going to be? And how much are the people who should be in the best position to take advantage of this it is Gen Z, because they have grown up with that technology. But instead of growing up using that technology to enhance their development, what we as a society have done is literally retard their development with that technology.
Hmm.
Well, this got dark.
Yeah. Well, to me, we talk about the elites versus the not the
Mm,
have-nots, right? And how that gap is widening. And it may be just natural. But I don't believe in just natural on a societal level with at least some bad actors. And what we see, again, we can go back to COVID. What we saw was the elites' children were still getting educated.
yeah.
And I would have no doubt that they are still getting educated in a proper manner. It's us middle class laptop class with the suburban schools that they're on the laptops the whole time. If you've got a private tutor, you're sitting there with a book, writing it with your hand and discussing it with a person. And one of the things that was brought up in that is we were evolved to learn from another person. We weren't evolved to learn from a screen. We weren't even evolved to learn as well from the written word. Socrates warned about this. What was that, 3,000 years ago? Or
No.
just over 2,000 years ago? You know, he warned about the written word actually causing lessening the ability to think. The problem is with verbal history versus written history is our perspective on that starts with the written word. So we can't know going all the way back actually how highly intelligent they were. Maybe they were more I mean, the Pythagoreans, we still use their math, right? And that was right on the turn of the written word. So they were actually highly functional. Look at what the Mayans did. Look at what, they discovered pi around the same time that the Greeks discovered pi, around the same time that the Eastern Asian Orientals, which we call China now, discovered the discovered pi, which the complications of discovering pi are all over. They've discovered it in three different ways. So obviously people were high level thinkers back then. We look back at the past and say, oh, they're primitive. Primitive just means they only had a certain amount of technology. But what we forget is they're the ones that laid the groundwork to the technology we have now. Without Pi, you don't have a computer screen right now because so many advancements came out of it that it ultimately became that thing that you're watching us on or listening to us on.
It is what allowed for geometry,
Yeah.
and
So,
geometry
so my
was
point was,
necessary for advanced math.
So my point was, we don't know if Socrates was right or not. He may have been right. They may have been more critical thinkers before the written word, but we also get so much from the written word, i.e., history, because that's what we have. As far as we can go back as humans. You know, you don't listen to your wokies that say, "Oh, they pass down stories in this indigenous tribe." Yeah, they do, but have you ever played telephone?
Mhm.
The written word, at least on the right substance, is going to stick around.
Speaking of the written word, I'll just pick on myself since we're picking on Gen Z here. I've I'm trying to get back to reading fiction, because the only fiction I've read lately is when we reread The Wheel of Time, and we're still talking about that. And as you've said, your brain works differently when you're reading fiction versus nonfiction, and most of my reading is nonfiction. Um, and so I started reading something a couple of weeks ago, and it reminded me of a fun little thing from a guy named Existential Comics who writes uh, web comics about philosophers. And he tweeted this out a while ago, and it made me think of it because I'm trying to read Notes from the Underground by Dostoevsky.
Mm.
Um, because it was the smallest one that I had. And I thought,
Yeah,
let me
you
try
wanted to
and
do
get
the
through this.
brothers carry
I know. And then I looked at it
and
and
I
I
looked
thought,
at it,
you know what?
it is this thick in
Yeah,
very small print.
it's like a 1,500 page book.
In very small print.
And I thought
Print, I need these.
much
Yeah.
like when I was thinking about going to law school and instead decided to do the paralegal program because it had been over 20 years since I was in a classroom. So same thing. I thought, you know what? Let's do a warm up first. And even with the warm up, it has been slow going, but it reminded me of this British novel. Let's go to a party and find a wife. German novel. Let's go to the wilderness and find ourselves. Russian novel. Let's go to the depths of despair and then find out there's an even deeper level of despair we didn't know about and go there. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not that far into Notes from the Underground, but yeah. Yeah,
Maybe
even
maybe
deeper
that'll be
level
our
of
cover.
despair.
You need to send me that one. The problem
But
with the wordy ones is they're really small in the thumbnails, but
the the point being, I at least have that foundation. I'm just trying to there's all that clutter has gotten in the way and I'm trying to clear it out so I can get back to that foundation. But I at least have the chance to get back there and like, okay, work those muscles. It's been a while, but work those muscles. If you never developed that ability in the first place, you know, when I was training, one of the I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I assume you have, of one of the best and also one of the worst types of people to work with is someone who was formally athletic.
mm,
Because on the one hand, it's really good because they do have that foundation. They have a little bit of that muscle memory, and then they have the mental ability of, yeah, I've done this before. I remember how this works. But on the other hand, they oftentimes try and do what they used to do when they can't do that anymore. And it's
mm.
like, no, slow down, slow down. We've got to get back there. Yeah, I know you used to do this, but now you've been sitting behind a desk for over a decade and you haven't been very active. And no, we got to rebuild. We got to rebuild. You know, so at least there's the memory, the experience, and so you can build off of it so long as you don't push too hard too fast. Um,
Yeah,
someone
well, I
who's
mean, I'll be for those that have followed the channel for a long time, which if you're listening this long, you probably are one of those. I went through some health issues for the last, okay, so May will be 2 years, 2 year anniversary of the actual surgery. And the issue started about, so May to December, the December before that, the issue started. And it basically made it to where I couldn't exercise. Like, not like, oh, well, you're just being dramatic. You just don't feel well when you exercise. No, I would literally, like, for lack of a better word, shit my pants and be in pain for 4 days if I did. And so, I mean, and it's a year recovery from the surgery. And then after the recovery, you still have problems if the surgery isn't completely successful. So it has been something. And even though it flares up every once in a while, it's manageable for the most part. But I had to not only take a step back, but really be realistic of maybe it's going to start with twice a week. And maybe it's going to start with 30 minutes twice a week and see where it goes. Okay, you used to deadlift, the you used to could crowd. You used to deadlift, 435 for 5 reps. Maybe you should start with 185 and go from there. And that actually, from a psychological perspective, makes you not want to do it.
Mhm.
It makes you not want to do it at all. But we then, I mean, you've been looking great, by the way. For those that haven't seen Heath's transformation, just because he's only shoulders up, he's been working really hard for the last, I don't know how long, and you look fantastic when you were here for the Super Bowl party. So I should have told you in person, but yeah, he looks fantastic, and I know he still has his issues, but he's working through them pretty well. Uh,
Well,
and
to your point, it is because I got my mental. I mean, this is the whole reason you're going back to school is to stool Freudian slip there. Sorry about that, buddy. You want
as long
to,
as it's not the whatever gangrene you were talking about.
yeah, you really want to marry that physical and mental instead of having them be separate. You go to this
Mhm.
person for that, you go to that person for that, and you know, I think I said this when we were recording. I don't remember, but a while ago. I said something just kind of off the cuff to my wife when she asked how my workout was, and I thought, you know what? That's I think why I'm doing better, feeling better than I have in a while is she asked how my workout went, and I said, I didn't do everything I wanted to, but I did everything I could.
You
That
know,
was incredibly hard for me for a long time. And in it, I would hurt myself. I would regress because I would try and push too hard. I would try and do what I wanted to do rather than what I could do. But as I've worked on my mental health more, it is much easier to be in that space of, you know what? I did what I could and I'm satisfied with that.
okay, let me get us back to your point that you were making when we kind of went on this little tangent. And then I put a note that we're going to come back to this conversation. Okay.
Okay.
Because I think it's a great conversation to have, but not in between the other conversation. And I think we could fit, I think I've got a couple thoughts which will actually finish the other one out really, really efficiently. But your point was if you're not working this when you're young, it's going to not, you're not going to have the base when you're
Mhm.
older to just come back and relearn learn being the physical effects of it, the growth of the brain, the neurons, the synapses, or just the what we see from the outside looking in, the affect of it, which would be the psychological term, which is how it expresses in your behavior and your abilities, right? So the affect would be the result of all the underlying things that are happening. So, and we can measure both. And that's what this guy did. Scores on the test, the IQ, that's the affect of all the underlying things. And kind of we can address them. First of all, I want to address the confounding variables with this statement. So the first one, and these are the we don't knows, is he said kids are in school longer, so we should be getting a better result. I would argue with that with
Mhm.
maybe we had hit the right dose response before, and now we're on the tail end where more is not better, more is worse. So there's that one. So there's a confounding variable. The second one is we also have not only additional tech in schools, but we have additional tech on their free time.
Yeah.
Doom scrolling and TikTok and random YouTube videos that make you dumber just halfway watching them. So we have those two variables and the literature kind of brought up it's very I stayed general with what I came up because I didn't want to spend all day doing a lecture here, but the first one I brought up is actually the physical effect, what's happening underneath.
Hmm.
And this is a meta-analysis by I think I'm going to pronounce that Solly, but it could be Soli, but with the two L's, it should be Solly. Solly and colleagues, structural gray matter differences and problematic usage of the internet, a systematic review and meta-analysis. So this was the closest I kind of came to his just more tech in the
Mhm.
learning process. And in the conclusions here or the results, data sets contributing to these findings, data sets being all the studies they pulled into this meta analysis of the
Yeah, a
study.
reminder, a meta-analysis is a study of studies.
Yeah, it's a collection of all the controlled trials or whatever their goal was in this case. Data sets contributing to these findings all indicate reduced gray matter in cases compared to controls. So increased usage of the internet resulted in reduced gray matter. The gray matter being the outside layer of the brain, which is the actual the actual nerve uh, nuclei. All right, so the white matter in the middle is the axons that transfer the signal. The actual nuclei are all on the outside with their little tails, which are the axons going into the middle, which transfer the signal. So that's a pretty significant finding. So if just increased internet usage is going to reduce gray matter, what is using the the computer or the internet all day, every day at school going to do to your brain?
And then you come home
It,
and you keep doing it.
yeah, especially at a very young age when you're actually more susceptible to this kind of thing. But then I also the confounding variable doom scrolling, and he said there's a lot of in that testimonial. He actually said there's a lot of empirical evidence, but then he's like, and we won't go into that right now. So I had to kind of go off what he was talking about. Doom scrolling itself, it has been highly studied. So I just took one meta-analysis on doom scrolling and mental health and well-being. And obviously, I mean, we could say obviously, but it's good that they study it because
Mhm.
some things that are obvious aren't always the the case, you know. But you know, it's a hard habit to break. We can quickly divert our minds, but the technology is, well, according to the study, contributing to things like depression, anxiety, all the mental health issues that we're basically saying, hey, what's going on here? Why are our kids not all okay? Another good source, right there. Jonathan Haidt, Anxious Generation.
Mm.
Good read, good listen. Now, I will say I listened to it for the most part, but then I bought the book because he goes over a lot of charts and graphs, which are all in the book. Now, if you listen to it on Audible, you can still get if you buy the Audible, you can get the PDF with all the charts and graphs. But then you end up reading something anyways while you're listening to it, so you might as well have the book. Uh, but then we got Dopamine Nation on top of that. These quick hits of dopamine are creating an environment where these kids can't pay attention. So we've got lost gray matter, we've got increases in depression, anxiety, we have a loss of attention span. And instead of addressing those things and trying to find the root cause, which we do have evidence that it might be the increased screen usage during school hours, with addition to their increased screen usage outside of school hours. Instead of addressing that, they changed the test so kids can pass.
Mhm.
I'm all for updating to the modern environment, but also we have to figure out what long-term harms we're doing. I mean, maybe you add a section that is, you know, your quick memory for, you know, instant information, because we're going to be barraged by instant information for more and more of our lives. So maybe you add a section instead of replacing a section.
Do you remember my mom was our sixth grade math teacher
Fifth.
at fifth, sixth,
She was
whatever.
my fifth grade math teacher.
Every class, almost every class, she
No,
would
maybe
start,
you are right.
yeah, sixth,
Sixth. Okay.
because that was the first year that we had a different teacher for each subject.
Mm.
Um, Mad minutes of simple arithmetic problems. Um, Way more than you could ever do in a minute. But the point was to get through as many as you could and do them right. And kids would complain, why do we have to do this? We have a calculator. Why do we have to do this? You know, we're in sixth grade. We're not doing simple arithmetic. And her point was, one, you're not always going to have a calculator in real life.
Which
Well,
turned out to be the biggest lie of teacher
yeah,
history.
oopsie.
Yes. Yeah.
But for a long time we did it. But two, because it's going to wake up your brain, because it's getting your brain ready to do math by making it work. Essentially, it was a warm-up exercise. The same reason, you know, you do some jump rope or you get on a treadmill or you whatever, get on a rowing machine to warm up for exercise, for physical exercise. It was get that gray matter working. And the reason I bring that up is because the response from these kids were like, why do we have to read a whole book? And, you know, I don't need to because I have this, because I can just find the summary, because I can just learn what it's about. This isn't necessary. And that was the other part of the analogy I wanted to make to the physical is where I worry that, you know, for those of us who have kind of let our gray matter atrophy a little bit, at least we have that foundation. I worry about those who don't even understand why it matters in the first place. You know, so for instance, I talked about the person who used to be athletic and you're trying to get back to being athletic. There's another type of person that you sometimes have to work with, which is that someone who was never athletic and never saw the point, never
Mm.
cared.
I thought
And
you were going to go a different direction. I thought you were going to go with the person who just naturally was big and strong or whatever and
the,
didn't compete in athletes, didn't work out, did you know,
the
but was just
mhm.
like, I've been fine all my life.
Well, the similar component, you could have someone who's like, I'm not in shape, but I'm not out of shape. I feel fine. I can do the things I need to do physically, whether it comes to, house or work or whatever. I don't need to exercise. I watch what I eat. I may not have muscle mass, but my weight is fine, whatever. At some point you're going to hit a wall. Usually it's around 40 where you go, ow, how come I wake up hurting every morning? How
And the
come
SIs start.
Yep. How come after several hours of sitting in a chair, I'm shifting around and I gotta stretch my back and I stretched too far, now my back hurts. Well, because you never did those things. And now all of a sudden you realize, oh, I guess maybe I should exercise. I guess maybe I should do some mobility work, some flexibility work, get a little bit of strength. But you've gone your whole life without doing that. Do you even know how? Or do you just say, you know what? That's really hard and it's fine. It's not that big a deal. Well, it's only going to get worse the longer you let it sit. The longer you go after you hit that point, it's just you're going to get physically worse and it's going to be even harder to actually get in shape. Same thing mentally. I worry with this IQ drop of how much is Gen Z going to care? How much are they going to say, oh, maybe we should do something about it. Maybe I should work out my gray matter, or I don't need to. I'm fine. I know how to look stuff up. I know how to find the answer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to intuit or infer or contextualize. I can just look it up. And I brought up the perhaps impending AI apocalypse, AI boom, AI, whatever you want to call it. How much is that going to make it even worse?
Well, I'll even go probably preceding AI. What do we think about things like Neuralink, where you
Mm,
just have a thought and you have the answer? How much of the brain is going to atrophy when there's a little chip in your head that does everything for you?
yeah, yeah. With
And,
every
and
month that goes by, the more I think the two most prescient uh movies ever made were Idiocracy and Wall-E.
mm, Wally, yeah, from a physical standpoint, definitely Wally, because the more, I mean, the concept is the more technology we have, the worse our physical health gets. And that, I mean, nobody can deny that that hasn't happened.
Well, so what do we do about it? Physically and mentally, what do we do about it?
Uh, we keep encouraging people. That's what we do. What happens on a societal level? Well, we're two guys screaming at the clouds, right?
Mhm.
Now, granted, technology is a good thing. We have a big cloud to scream on, even though our audience is small. Technically, someone can accidentally put in a search term and come across our video, right?
Mhm.
Or just get it recommended on their channel for some odd reason, which doesn't seem to happen often. But we have this mechanism to do that. But that's all we can do. And there's people with bigger audiences that are encouraging the same thing. On a societal level, you hope that our voices are louder than the laziness of, oh, I have a meme for us already. Don't, it says, don't blame the lazy people. They didn't do anything. Uh, but the inherent laziness, which is actually natural, we're designed to be lazy because we're designed to conserve energy.
Mhm.
But that our voices are louder and more impactful and people start feeling it before what you talked about with the apocalypse, because eventually you have things like economic collapse when more people are dependent on a healthcare system than can support the healthcare system. Bad things are going to happen. When
Mhm.
more people are dependent on what the welfare system than can support the welfare system, bad things are going to happen. And we see that with just the age gaps growing. 65 and above is the largest growing population in the United States because we're living longer and we're having less kids. We're at 1.62, I think, is the latest number on replacement rate. We're going to see it happen in South Korea, and I hope the whole world gets a nice little punch in the face from it. And I'm sad that somebody has to be an example, but if you don't do anything about it, then everybody's the example. So
Mhm.
So hopefully the voices that are pushing what we're talking about are louder and received at some point before all of that happens. That's what we do about it. We just keep doing what we do.
Uh, uh, I would say the first thing I thought of when I asked that question is, since we are talking about our younger generation, our kids, um, and for some of us, our grandkids, that absolutely monitor that screen time, and not just at home, but be vocal with your school about, hey, how come my kid has a Chromebook? Why is that necessary? If they have
If are they in computer science? If they're in computer science, they need the Chromebook.
are they typing a paper? No? Okay, well, close the darn thing and get out a book and get out some paper
Hmm.
to make your brain work.
Well, but here's the thing, and we have a pattern here. Why is screen time increasing at home? Because I'll put in air quotes, parents are busy and it's easy.
Hmm.
Why is it increasing in school? Because it's easy.
Hmm.
You know how much pressure that takes off the teacher and it takes off the administration? Hand them a Chromebook that has a pre-made module in it, and then just make sure they're watching it while they're in class. You're basically a babysitter, not a teacher.
I purposely set out to do only in-person classes this
Mm.
semester because, one, I needed to see how many classes I could take a semester physically without, all right, how am I going to feel? But also, I didn't feel like I learned that much from my online class last semester. It's like I tried my best to push myself, to give myself extra work, but just the nature of that online course, I just did not retain very much information.
Yeah, that was my first semester, which I then refused to not do an online or not do a in-person course after
Mhm.
that. Is because I had one online course and I'm like, I got an A.
Yeah,
What did I learn? If someone
exactly.
asked
Same
me
here.
about the subject material, I would be like, I got an A in the class. That's that's my answer.
The, Pretty much the only stuff I retained was, this was the class I griped about a lot, that so much of it was just grammar review. It was like a remedial class. So I remember the stuff I already knew. That doesn't help me. And frustratingly, as I was looking, so many of the classes are only available online.
Hmm.
It's not like, well, you can do this online or hybrid or in person. No, no, it's this particular course, which you have to take, is only available online.
Hmm.
Why? As you
Yeah,
say, because it's easy.
and that's my beef with the Peterson Academy is they say the only thing missing is the social component, and they're working on that with kind of a social media thing. I think they're wrong. And
Hmm.
I think there are people on the staff doing lectures that know that is wrong because we know that online learning is not the same as in-person learning. It is not, discussing an article via a chat is not the same as discussing an article with someone in your face, being confrontational, and you have to defend your position. It's just not the same.
Hmm.
Otherwise, the freaking trolls on the internet wouldn't be as popular because they're not as smart as they think they are.
No, they're just clever.
Yeah.
Clever and intelligent are not necessarily the same thing.
They're linked, they're correlated.
Hmm.
But I mean, I think that's a matter of aim more than ability. But
Yeah, that's a good point, because when you talk about the trolls, especially the ones that are the grifting trolls, the ones that are monetizing the trolling, they are very targeted for a particular goal, which is clicks and eyeballs.
mhm.
And and we need to stop feeding that. I have heard from multiple people that TikTok in the West and TikTok in China are not even remotely the same thing. That in China, by government decree, basically, the algorithm there pushes STEM content to
Mhm.
kids. And here it pushes the brain rot
Mhm.
on purpose.
The dances and the trends and all. Yeah, oh, TikTok is such a cesspool. But do you want to transition? I think we covered everything. So yeah, I brought up the confounding
Mhm.
variables and then brought up the literature to support his his thesis. And yeah, I'll link it in the description. give it a listen. If there is a longer version, then like Heath said, then go look
Mhm.
for that. But I mean, it is still compelling because we're adding all these things to school, but we're going backwards. So obviously, either we hit a dose response, or we're doing something wrong. One of
Mhm.
the two. And so it's either too much or the wrong thing. And changing the testing protocol is not going to change it. It's basically that is the definition of ostrich parasitic syndrome, right? The ostrich effect. You're putting your head in the sand. That's actually a psychological term, is the ostrich effect. You're putting your head in the sand by changing the criteria.
You know, I just
It's like strength. Deadlift max measures your strength. Well, all of a sudden nobody can do a deadlift. Bench press max, but all of a sudden nobody can. Uh, how far you can run measures your strength. No, it doesn't.
it just reminded me of something. We haven't talked about the vid in a long time, and it your point reminded me of that hilariously awesome heated exchange between Dr. Rand Paul and Dr. Anthony Fauci, where Rand Paul basically, you know, shined the light on the clothesless emperor of no, of course we aren't doing gain of function. And as Paul pointed out, that's because you just changed the definition
Hmm.
so that you could say we're not doing it. But you are absolutely doing it. And he basically forced him to admit it by forcing him to show what the definition used to be and then explain what the definition is now and said, there you go. That's what we're doing. How'd that work out for us then? I mean,
Hmm.
we talked
Well,
about
you're the legal guy. I'm sorry, I have to ask. It, when you're saying, "Oh, well, did this person do this thing in the court of law?" Is it the wording of the law at the time they did it, or the wording of the law at the time they're being in the time they're on trial?
at the time.
At the time they did it?
Mhm.
See, there you go. Then why do we need anything further?
That is why there have been instances, and I think this caused some change in the law, but there were, kind of infamous instances of outrage where a cold case was solved, but the perpetrator basically got no time because at the time he committed the crime, he was a juvenile, and the law at the time would not allow him to be charged as an adult. And so that resulted in some changes, but it couldn't affect that case, but would affect subsequent cases. But for that in particular case, I will go back to, and I think this applies to where we started here with Gen Z and intelligence is uh I don't know who first said this, but we are not a nation of law. We're a nation of political will.
Mm,
And that is anything. It is, what the law is, what the culture is, what things are supposed to be are completely irrelevant if we don't have the will to enforce it.
hmm.
You can say all you want. Wow, I've got to get in shape. Wow, I've got to get healthier. Wow, I've got to, study and make myself smarter. If you don't have the will to do it, it doesn't matter.
We're going back to our relationship talks. Oh, we need to pay more attention to each other, or we need to be more attuned to each other's needs. But then if you don't do it,
Mm-hmm.
if the next time, you know, you have plans and they get canceled at the last minute again, at some point, it doesn't matter what the reason is.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, okay, well, this isn't apparently a thing. There's no follow-up to it. So these things, again, I talk about complex systems versus complicated systems. Yeah, there is complicated things about relationship, or there's not complicated things about health, and there's complicated things about, you know, uh, economics or whatever, but they're complex systems. And complex systems need movement in the right direction to create homeostasis well, it's going to create homeostasis no matter what. It just, where does it land? Everything has to move in that direction, and every part of it has to be contributing to that. Which, again, back to the subject at hand, what part of this thing, this complex thing, which is the education of our children and the development of their brains, is what's contributing to the end result, the end product, which is them getting dumber. And I'm going to end my part on this, and then well, me and Heath will take a quick break, but it'll be a couple seconds for you, a blip for you, and then we'll move on to that workout thing we were talking about. But uh, what part of this complex system is failing? Yeah, so basically taking that entire system and saying, well, what did we change? What are we doing more? What are we doing less? What seems to be helping? What seems to not? And I think we got enough literature to actually give us a direction here. I think this guy is right. We need to really be analyzing this.
Yeah, and there are definitely some places where we could start because as you say, there's plenty of literature on some of these variables for sure where we could go, okay, I think we've got enough data here. We can do something about this. We can change this. We can eliminate that. We can, uh, you know, we can get started and then see what else. As you say, it's a very complex system. That means you got to slowly start eliminating variables, but we have some that we can act on.
Hmm.
So
Well, and a
do it.
lot of times you need to look at the last things added. So if you add
Yeah.
something to your diet and you don't feel well, that's probably the thing you should take away first to see if, oh my gosh, was that the thing that did it? If
Hmm.
you've added a new medication and all of a sudden you're getting you're feeling unwell, that's probably a side effect of the medication. At least look up the side effects in the brochure that came with it, right? So, and then you make a risk reward analysis of what's better, what's not. So again, we'll go to education here to close it out. Okay, so we just talked for 45 minutes, almost an hour of on the risks of the excess of technology in the classroom. What are the benefits? Well, that's the future. Are we trading off a little bit of IQ point to better prepare our children for the lifestyle they're going to live? That actually might be beneficial, right? But we need to look at everything else, like again, time in school and all of those other. I remember what the point was I was going to bring up. That 2% loss
Hmm.
that we had, people say, oh, it's only 2%.
Oh
On
yeah.
a bell curve, a 2% shift in the mean is very, very, very consequential to the tails. So if everybody that played basketball in the United States on average was 2% worse, you don't have a Michael Jordan anymore. You don't have even a LeBron James anymore, as much as we complain about him, because the tail of the bell curve is going to be the most affected. So you're going to have a crappy NBA. If the entirety of everybody in the United States that plays basketball gets 2% worse, the the tail of the bell curve, which is the guys who make it all the way, the 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 top 1% is the worst kid that plays college basketball, okay? That product is going to be horrible and everybody's going to stop watching the NBA. That's the impact of that. So now a 2% shift in the bell curve on IQ is substantial in that we're are you going to see a Stephen Hawking again? Are you going to see a Carl Sagan again? Are you going to see, you know, hell, as much as I complain about it, are you going to see a DeGrasse Tyson again? That might be the top of the bell curve at this point, and we see how that goes. So and that's my dig at Tyson. I still want to debate him on dopamine and the hot shot, the hot hand in basketball, but uh, yeah. So that's my point that we underestimate what's actually happening because the number doesn't look big, and we need to examine this on a holistic level and say, okay, let's look at the newest things first. Do we need an elimination diet? Do we need to eliminate all of these things and start from scratch and add things at a time?
Hmm.
Or do we need to eliminate one thing at a time and see if we hit a nerve?
Yeah.
And the safe way is the second way, the latter. The fastest cure is the first way with a lot of bodies in the wake. It's ripping the band-aid.
All right. Did you have another topic or did you want to go to, we have some comments that we haven't looked at
Were
in a
you done
while.
talking about the workout and motivation and mental health?
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it all kind of comes together, with the same idea of you need to find that motivation and both physical and mental, find ways to keep yourself accountable and to help each other and get started before it becomes necessary. Because that was basically what this guy that I referenced, the AI CEO guy in his article, one of his points was you'd better start learning this stuff now. Because before too long, it's going to be necessary, and then you're going to be behind the curve. So mentally and physically, don't wait until, oh crap, I'm dumb and I don't know how to do the thing. Start learning things. Don't wait until you're constantly sore and in pain and, having health trouble before you start trying to get in shape. It's just going to be that much harder.
And don't wait till our kids get too dumb to take care of us when we're old.
That too.
Yeah, there we go. All right, on to the comments. You have them queued up?
Yeah, I went back a couple weeks where I saw some comments that I don't remember addressing. One of them mostly irrelevant, but kind of funny, from our neuroplasticity and masculinity episode a couple weeks ago. Kelpie said, I came here after listening to the industrial music group from the 1980s test department. I have no idea how those two things are related and how that came up on your algorithm, but okie dokie. Thank you. Welcome.
Well, we talked about music in that episode.
Oh, we did. We did
Yeah,
talk about
yeah.
music. Yeah.
Because the role of music and cinema and everything in the neuroplasticity. So
All right. So, Isomorphic had several comments from our false positives and false negatives in statistics to relationship dynamics. All right. So, not even 4 minutes in, and I got to object. No, Heath, Ben Shapiro is not the autistic logic robot that he wants you to believe when he's telling you that it's logical and good when your group is going extinct and your natural reaction of disgust and rebellion is just your illogical feelings getting in the way. He has plenty of feelings when it comes to Israel. In fact, it's the core of those plentiful feelings for his homeland that dictate his autistic logic when it comes to leading others to suicide. All of this to say you are right to object to him, but you're giving him too much credit. And being who he is, he will take the credit you're willing to give and all the ground you're willing to cede without returning the favor. So be austere in your magnanimity. Hard word. I agree and I disagree a little bit. I mean, it's my point there with the autistic logic robot. The guy is smart. To your point about, giving credit where it's due to Neil deGrasse Tyson, even though in a lot of ways we think he's a moron. We think
I think he's a shill.
Very,
I don't think he's a moron. I think he's smart enough to know what he's doing, but he's doing it anyways.
I think some of it is that for sure, but I also think I don't know if there's a term for this, but I think really smart people can Dunning-Kruger themselves.
They're the more likely.
Okay, I did not know that, because every time I've seen it seen the term used, it is referring to people who aren't very smart, who think they're smarter than they are.
No, it's ability in a specific thing.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And actually smart people are I'm putting two lines of research into the same thing. So not as good at something as you think you are. So it's specific to the something is the Dunning-Kruger. Smart people, and the other line is smart people are better at talking themselves into thinking that they're right.
Yeah. So Shapiro is definitely very intelligent. He has demonstrated that through his achievements, but that also leaves him very blind in certain areas of, oh, well, I'm really smart and I think this about X, therefore that must be the answer. Well, not necessarily, buddy. And since I brought it up, one of the more glaring examples of that relatively recently was he was very rightfully criticized, and it took him a very long time, and I don't think he ever really made a mea culpa on the jab. And it's one of the reasons I stopped listening to him, because I got sick and tired of him saying my wife's a doctor. Yeah, so first of all, I think she's a pediatrician, nothing against that, but is she an epidemiologist? Is she a virologist? Because I've got Dr. Mark Malone over here saying this, and he's an actual expert on this because he helped invent the technology. Okay, so I think I'll go with him. Why aren't you listening to him? Why aren't you addressing his points? Why aren't you looking into what he's saying? But he very rigid, you bring up mental rigid thinking. It's been a while, but we harped on that for a while, and he very rigidly had his blinders on for this thing because he just assumed, oh, I'm smart, you know, my wife's smart. This is what we think, so this must be the answer. And did not deviate from that. In the same way that Neil deGrasse Tyson, I'm a smart guy, so let me comment on, philosophy and theology and these other things that are
And
way outside.
physiology.
Yeah, way outside my area of expertise.
Like I said,
And
I would happily debate him on two topics.
mhm.
One is the hot hand and the physiology behind it, and astrophysics. And I would say you can go first with astrophysics. Or we'll start with astrophysics. I'll go first, and I'll stand up and say, "You win." And then I'll sit back down, and then I will say, "Now let's talk the hot hand and the dopamine system because you know nothing about it."
Mhm. All right. Other comment from Isomorphic. Hi guys, just dropping by to say what's up and thanks for what you're doing. Heath got cool glass. I forgot I was wearing sunglasses in that episode because of my migraine. I see that nature flashbangs you even in North Texas, and you don't even have to play Tower in Heroes 3 to feel the effect. It's between 7 and -2 Fahrenheit here, so we're used to it, Heath. But trust me, it's better when it's sunny and snowy than when it's gloomy and snowy. Well, that's true.
That's a fair point. Yes.
At least you get the benefit of some sunshine. Um, we had that yesterday, which did not help my mood because I wasn't feeling good. And it was just a solid gray sky here yesterday, and it's hard to get moving when you're already not feeling good, and you look outside and it's just solid gray clouds. At least now it's nice and sunny, so that helps the motivation a little bit, to get up and get moving.
I'll go ahead and comment on the great feminization comments. We got White Pill Radio there, which is white pill is better than black pill, everyone, because there's hope. There is much more variation in men than women, height, strength, IQ, etc. And this is true. It is a flatter bell curve in men and women. The common slogan with that is, and I'm wanting to say this is Bus's lab, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong, is men are nature's playthings.
Mm.
There's more variation, and women determine which one of us make it. Your cover quip with this is Dr. Dum Dum 904. Your cover quip with the beer drinking insect is funny. Yes. And if you can read it, it's he's having another beer and staying out late because his wife's going to it's a praying mantis because his wife's going to take his head off anyways when he gets home. So he might as well have fun.
Yep.
Then we got Jason from the Self-Fulfilling Prophecy one, if you want to read that one.
Yeah. As usual, Jason is dropping. I guess it's a good thing I brought up existential comics earlier because he's dropping the big words and the philosophy here. What about frame and logos as opposed to letting circumstances dictate your actions and begging circumstances to change to suit you? The data is there. It's massively slanted negatively. Many are black pilled. That is also a choice. Red pill works. Red pill doesn't work. Perhaps red pill isn't even the solution. It's in another castle. Moving one's paradigm into the being paradigm. You act despite it all, consciously choosing perspective.
Well, that would be the Stoic mindset.
That just reminded me of, oh shoot, who was this? I can't remember who did this. It may have been Echo Chamberlain, who I've referenced before. He had somebody I was watching several weeks ago had an AI generated voice reading Marcus Aurelius as Red Foreman from that 70s show. And
Nice.
then added at the, and he showed the quote, and it was a quote from Marcus Aurelius, famous Stoic. And then at the end, he added dumbass because Red Foreman, that's why. but that is, you know, that is why those things haven't gone out of fashion. They may have ebbed and flowed in their popularity, but uh the Stoics and Stoicism are still around and still read and still thought about and talked about because there's applicability there, you know, even to our modern world. Uh, and that would be, you know, we talked a fair bit in that episode about how to not do that. And that's what Jason is addressing, is kind of how you create a framework to keep yourself from that negativity bias in the first place, or at
Mhm.
least help buffer it. So
Well,
there's a place you can go if you want some help. Is, you know, it's in the public domain, so you can find the ebook for free, is Marcus Aurelius.
yeah, and to take it back to one of our other previous conversations is what's actually better for you? You know, we talked about relationships. What's better, a false positive or a false negative? A lot of times you create, you self-fulfill prophecy by acting on false positives. You know, he's cheating on me, but he actually wasn't, right? But then you keep treating him like, to the example that was in the joke, all right?
Mhm.
But you keep treating him like he's cheating on you to the point where he's just like, fuck, F it. Might as well do it. I'm getting accused of it every day.
Yeah.
Here's my opportunity. Or you just, they're just unhappy and they go out drinking more often and they're in the situation more often. If you go on deep water often enough, as rare as shark bites are, eventually there's going to be a shark.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I had a thought.
That's the source of male jealousy because every time a beautiful woman
Oh,
goes out, she's in the deep water with sharks.
yeah, we uh this came up in something we were listening to over the weekend. Who's the divorce lawyer guy? Sexton.
Sexton, yep.
And he made the point about how men and women who are in a relationship, they cheat differently. And now
Hmm.
he was being hyperbolic, and it was funny, but it is making the point of, when a guy cheats, it's, I was horny, there was a hot girl, and so we did it behind the dumpster,
Hmm.
right? It's okay, well, hopefully not literally behind a dumpster because that's gross, but that's how men cheat. And that is where the cross-sex mind reading can get you into trouble, because men are going to assume the same thing about women, but that's not how they are. Very, very rarely. Let me put it that.
Yeah, overlapping
Generally
bell curves. We
speaking,
just talked
yeah.
about bell curves. There's overlap.
Generally speaking, a woman is not going to cheat just because there's horny and there's a guy she's attracted to. No, there needs to be a buildup there. Now, it may be that she has been dissatisfied in her relationship for months,
Hmm.
that she has been building something up in her mind, consciously or unconsciously, and then the opportunity arises, but there has to be a buildup there. It's not going to happen just because there's the opportunity. Whereas with guys, it is more direct. I almost said simple again, but we talked several weeks ago. You said no, that's because I said men are simple, and that's kind of like, uh, you know, getting fit isn't hard. Oh, wait a minute, it is hard, or we would all be as svelte and gorgeous as Hugh Jackman. But it's not complicated. And you brought up the same point when we talk about men. The why we do things, that can get pretty complicated, actually. That's not very simple. And the term I think we settled on, I think you came up with it, is we're very direct. You know, why we do a thing,
Well,
you know,
and
we
that's
can start
that's
digging
just
into,
like
maybe complicated.
the bonding with females is oxytocin, with males is
Mm,
vasopressin, right? And
mm,
vasopressin is about getting the job done. Well, if you're not direct in getting the job done, it ain't getting done.
yeah.
And but if you're not, nurturing and I don't know, almost a slow boil, which is kind of what oxytocin does. Now, this is a misconception because we've heard of mama bear. You know, don't if you encounter a bear in the woods, it's not the male bear, unless he's hungry. You
Yeah.
don't care. It's the bear, the mama bear with her cub around. That's also modulated by oxytocin, so it can make you violent
Yeah.
in the right situation. But at the same time, okay, so direct energy. If I'm going to bond, it's going to be a direct action for me. Whereas it's a feeling. It's a how am I gosh, I can't use the word in the definition, but how am I bonding with this person? Are they showing the time and that nurturing effort back on me? And there's some good literature on how the evolution of man was actually female selecting for men that are good with their children. So that's a whole nother conversation, but it is different, like you said, more direct for us men, much more
And
direct because it's our nature.
and back to Jason's comment here, the point being, this is why we talk about cross-sex mind reading and about the male perspective versus the female perspective, because you need to have that locked in your mind of, so that you can take a step back and go, oh, wait a minute, am I projecting here? Am I cross-sex mind reading? Am I assuming based on my feelings, my insecurities, what I may or may not do in a particular situation, so that you don't go down that road of negativity, so you don't,
Mhm.
spiral out of control, so that you can take a breath and then hopefully kind of get your own mind right, and then properly communicate. Is, you can't, um if you're a mess in your own mind, if you aren't sure what your thoughts are, it's really hard to have a conversation with someone unless you already have that incredibly strong bond. Like, we can think out loud together,
Mhm.
okay? And nobody's going to get butt hurt. We might chide and tease each other a little bit, but, we know where each other's coming from. And it's, well, I don't know. Well, maybe, but what about this? I could do that with my wife. But it was a lot harder to do that when we were newlyweds, because it's like, I feel insecure. I'm not sure if I could say this. I'm not sure if I should do that. I'm not sure what's going on in my own head. Can I think out loud with you?
Yeah, and this is important in relationship because we covered the self-fulfilling prophecy side, but I don't think we went too far into the sometimes you have to create some prophecy. You
Mhm.
have to set your boundaries, right, with your partner. Otherwise, you're going to be just in this tailspin all the time of a guessing game of, okay, they keep doing this behavior. Is it because they're cheating on me? Or is it because I didn't set a boundary that said, hey, this makes me think you're cheating on me? And did you set a boundary or did you set an ultimatum? It's very, again, relationships are complicated whether you're a guy or a girl.
Well, speaking of relationships, next time you, you started off saying, "Hey, for once we're not talking about relationships," but it's almost Valentine's. In fact, I think Saturday is Valentine's, isn't it? What's the date?
Mhm.
Yep. So Saturday, I'd mentioned this previously, and I want to rant about this some more. Is the relationship between Jonathan and Nancy in Stranger Things really ticked me off. The way their arc went, or not the way it went, the way it ended.
Mhm.
And I wanna bring this back to a lot of our Wheel of Time discussion, because I think there is a very interesting contrast between Perrin and Fail and Jonathan and Nancy. They are both young adults, new to a romantic relationship, trying to figure it out, and they end up in very different places, even though they go through some of the similar kinds of struggles. And so I want to talk about that and compare and contrast those, and why even with the slog, Perrin and Fail are so much better of a fictional representation and a fictional lesson to help you learn how to navigate these things, compared to what the writers did with Jonathan and Nancy at the end there, to make you go, ugh.
Yeah. And it really is a contrast of the modern writer versus the I guess older school
Mhm.
writer. So yeah, sounds like a good subject to explore. And anything else you want to add before we're out? Like,
Well, we'll
subscribe,
see if,
share, all that
yeah.
stuff if you made it this far.
Hey, we have 99 subscribers. Somebody go find a friend and tell them to subscribe to us.
Yes, I didn't know we'd gone up. Okay, so we're almost there, guys. Almost to 100. That's a landmark. 69 was the first landmark. 100 will be the next.
All right.
Right,
See y'all
later.
then.